Hey, this is Jackie from Jackie's Recent Things. I'm going to show you now how to add ruffles to your wreath base to really fill it out and make it beautiful. I don't know if y'all have heard before, but my whole goal is to have a sellable wreath from the time that I start. And it all starts with the wreath base. I believe that you have to have a firm base to build your wreath on. I'm going to use a rotary cutter to cut by mesh. This is a Fisker rotary cutter. It'll help cut back on the frame if you use a good rotary cutter. I'm using, once again, a jute 10-inch mesh, and I'm going to cut it 12 inches long. I've already cut some of the pieces, and I just have 4 more to cut. And I'm cutting them 12 inches long. Make sure that the blade on your rotary cutter is sharp. If the blade on your rotary cutter isn't sharp, it's going to scar your cutting mat very easy because it's going to force you to push down harder on your mesh, and that will be what ruins your cutting mat. Okay, so we've cut our mesh, so let me bring the wreath base back. The first thing I'm going to work on is I'm going to work on the bottom. Okay, I'm going to pull my ties apart. And the reason I'm going to pull my ties apart on the bottom, this is going to cut back on me handling my mesh, which will also prevent a great deal of fray. Also, the kind of mesh that you buy will prevent fray as well. If you use what they call a value mesh, or even one from Hobby Lobby, it's going to fray really bad. So I don't recommend doing a ruffle with those. Also, I'm going to use my tighter curled ones on the bottom. And I'm going to save my looser curled ones for the top. This will definitely make it easier in the long run when you get to the top of the wreath. For the bottom of the wreath, I'm going to go with the curl. And I am just simply going to go in the middle here and ruffle it up. And I'm going to be careful to not overhandle my mesh so that it won't fray. And then I'm going to go around the bottom and once again put one in each tie. Now the whole purpose for the ruffle that I use and the way that I do it is, one, later on it's going to create support for my ribbon, and also it's really going to finish rounding out my wreath and give me a really good base to build on. So once again, I'm using my smaller ones for the bottom. The reason that I'm curling them down is because I don't want to flatten them out. I want them to come out to round out this wreath. If I flatten them out, they don't come out to round out the wreath. And then they're not going to create the support for my ribbon that I want later on. The other purpose for adding ruffles to the wreath is that from the beginning when I make my wreath, I want the frame to disappear. I don't want you to be able to look through and see the frame. The frame is merely what we're using to build the wreath on and has no decorational purpose. So we just really don't want it to show up. Once we get to the top of the wreath, I've got a neat little trick that I'm going to show you. I'm always making sure, I don't want to have to go back and do it again, that my ties are down and out of the way because I don't want them snagging my mesh when I start to work on the top. If your mesh hangs on your ties, that's another thing that causes a great deal of fray. Okay, last one on the bottom, and then we're going to work on the top. And once again, as I'm tying these in, I'm doing it very secure, very tight. If you don't, later on, you're going to have a problem laying your ribbon. So let's talk about the neat little trick. First of all, let's deal with our ruffle. On the top, I'm going to change how I do it. I'm going to flip this over and face my roll down. I want my ruffle on top to lay flat as possible. The reason I want it to lay flat as possible is so that my ribbon will lay correctly later on when I start adding my ribbon. So I'm going to make sure that this is turned down before I add it. Now, if by chance that you accidentally got a frame, then there does happen, a frame where the mesh is just rolling under and you can't control it. Take a little corner of your poof and bring it up into your tie. So take your hand, bring it into your tie and hold it there. So while you're adding your ruffle, you're going to tie that corner in of that poof, which is going to prevent your mesh from rolling under. So every now and then we trip upon those frames where that happens, and that's just a neat little trick to keep your mesh from rolling under your frame. I'm going to go around and I'm going to open my ties and get them ready for me to put the rest of my ruffles in. And I'll show you that little trick again as I go around. This is not one of those frames where it rolls under. Like I said, every now and then it happens. We get them. And that's the little trick that I have found works to prevent it from rolling under. And it's not going to mess up your poof in any way. Let me turn my wreath back to where I was. So once again, we're going to take, here's how it rolls. We're going to flip it over. We're going to ruffle in the middle. And I would say that as I ruffle, they're about a ½ inch when I ruffle and I do my gather. So once again, I'm going to take a little corner of my poof. I'm going to pull it up to my tie. And I'm holding it there with my finger. And then I'm making sure that my ruffle is tied in. And then I'm pushing my ruffle up to make sure that it's laying flat as possible. Basically, you want it nice and open, like a clamshell, when it shows a pearl. So I'm going to keep grabbing a ruffle, or a poof, I'm sorry, and pulling a little bit of it. You don't need to pull much, just a little bit of corner of your poof to keep it from rolling under. Just 4 more ruffles to go. Like I said, my ruffles, I'm gathering at approximately about a 1/2 inch. They don't need to be super tight. Last one, y'all. Also, too, sometimes you might have a problem with your poofs creeping and separating, so that's also going to prevent it, too, when you pull just a little corner of your poof into your tie. And there you have it. You have a very full, beautiful, well-rounded base to start adding your ribbon to. Flip it up to the side so you can see. Thank y'all so much for joining me. I hope you're going to enjoy the next video as well. Bye, y'all.